All right. That was funny. I was standing there waiting on you. I thought you were doing something. I'm like, well, let me
Oh,
wait.
no, I was waiting on you.
So, all right, man. And well, first of all, welcome, George. Awesome to have you here. And for all of you, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with my friend George Bryant. And man, George, I'm looking forward to this. I'm
Me
looking
too,
forward
man.
to
I'm excited. I was stoked when I saw this in my calendar. I'm like, I get to talk to Kevin. Yes.
this. And it's cool because we were talking. I was like, man, I was trying to remember, how did you and I originally met? And this is so dang fitting that
Yep.
you were just like, well, it was Brad. It was Brad Costanzo. And
Yep.
and Brad was the catalyst for me starting this whole podcast in the first place. And so this is
Yep.
just so dang fitting. And so Brad, I mean, shout out to you, because here we
Mr.
are.
Mr. Bacon wrapped business himself.
That's right, Mr. Bacon Wrapped Business himself. And I haven't said this too much on this podcast, so I'm going to just say it now and just give a good, serious shout out to Brad, because
Yes.
he was the one that was kept. He's like, for a guy like you who values relationships so dang much, he's like, man, doing a podcast where you focused on letting people share their stories and their experiences around their most valuable relationships and letting them honor those people. He's like, that would be so inspiring to so many entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And he was dead right. And I will
Yep.
tell you, George, I know I said it before we hit the record button, but this has been hands down one of the most
Yep.
rewarding experiences I've had in my 27-year entrepreneurial career, is hosting this podcast. And I know the same is true for you. You told
Yep.
me, Kevin,
Yep.
same for me,
Yep.
man.
Legacy for me. And
And
and I'll edify Brad. Brad is one of my dearest, closest friends. I would consider a best friend. And Brad happens to be one of the most intelligent, resourceful, and giving human beings that I've ever met. He is one of the most brilliant minds, and I've yet to hear a bad idea come out of his mouth. And so, Brad, if you hear this, I love you, buddy. I'll call
yeah,
you. But for everybody listening, if you don't know about Brad, Brad's been on my podcast a few times as well. But Brad Costanzo, Breaking Rap Business, he's been in this game for a long time,
yeah.
and he is the little silent pinky in the brain behind the curtain that he will never edify, but he's a fucking genius. So
Yes,
there's
he
my
is.
recommendation for Brad.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll second what George just said, Brad. I love you too, man.
We just should dedicate this whole episode to Brad. We could
That's
just
right.
make a
That's
Brad fan club.
right. All right, so let's now that we've kind of got that done, let's start by, I'll turn it over to you, George, to
Yep.
share. We'll set a little bit of context. Let
Yep.
the listeners know who you are. Let them know what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you do, and we'll just start there, George.
Yeah. So I'm George Bryant. I believe I belong in a straitjacket, but they let me out, so I share the safest parts with you. Here's what I do. I have been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I've lived many lifetimes, and I did business wrong for most of my career until I realized all the collateral damage I caused, and I figured out how to do it right. And the way to do it right is by caring about people and understanding that at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So all I do now is I spend every ounce of my day giving away everything I have, everything that works, everything I know around marketing, customer journey, and mindset to empower entrepreneurs to ethically scale their business and do it in a way that doesn't have to sacrifice your soul and cause collateral damage on the way. And I'm telling you that it's possible, it's feasible, and it's easier to make millions of dollars in a positive way than it is to do it the hard way. And so I spend my time now working with, at this point, literally hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. I own 11 companies. I have a podcast, I do live events, and I go in and I help people use really powerful marketing strategies and tactics built on solid relationships that guarantee their success. And I've yet to lose in 10 years. And I do it for everybody. I give it all away for free. And it lights me up every day. And, for me, why I love it is because I've experienced near-death experiences enough in my life, going to war twice and attempting my own life and being shot and witnessing things that you should never witness. And I've made enough money and lost it enough to realize that it doesn't matter. And the only time I make enough is when I'm not attached to it. And I know that my bank account balance isn't going to be on my headstone. I know that it doesn't matter how many people show up for my funeral. What I think about every day is how many people are going to show up to silently support my family when I'm no longer here. And that excites me.
Mhm.
And so I wake up every day realizing that every single person I meet, I have the ability to positively influence their life. And it's going to make a world better for my kids, for generations to come, and everybody. And I am kind of addicted to that ripple. And it is the best, most satisfying, healthiest drug to be addicted to in the world. And so I love what I do, man. I spend every day talking to at least 100 people that I've never talked to or connected with, and entrepreneurs and humans. And I do everything in my power to give them a nugget or a step to help them get close to their dreams. And it just so happens I became one of the best marketers in the world doing it, and one of the best at customer journey. So that's the lens in which I teach it through now.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you you said something really huge, and I don't want to gloss over it, because the comment you made that really stuck out to me was that, the real measure of the impact and the legacy you've left on this earth after you're gone is who's going to be there to silently support my family after I'm gone and stuff. And
Yep.
that right there is one heck of a measure of the relationships that you've created while you're here on this earth and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And man, listen, like the amount of nights in 20 years I've cried about this, and I've sat on this, and I've reflected on this, and I've had it all, right? Like I had the vision board with the cars, with the houses, with the ranches. And guess what, Kevin? I got it all. And you know what it did? It made me fucking unhappy. And now I live in Montana. I drive a Subaru Outback station wagon, and I love every ounce of it. I wear pink shoes, and I don't really own anything. And I'm the happiest I've ever been. And just putting into perspective what really, really matters happens to also be one of the best strategies and tactics for abundance, because the only way to create money is to be unattached to making money. It
Mhm.
just so happens when you attach yourself to impact, making money is a byproduct, because in order to make money, human beings to exchange money foundationally have to feel subconsciously safe.
Yeah,
And the only way to do that is to have an established relationship. So it just so happens as a byproduct, it's the easiest way to do business as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. That whole thing of feeling safe, and just having that trust that just will allow them to, like, do whatever they feel is right to do, because those things, and like, and when the trust is there, when we've got trust in somebody's character and in their competence, there's like zero friction. There is
Well,
zero friction.
and I want to call you out for a minute because I want to edify you, but I also want to use you as an example because you were alluding to this before we recorded. But if you look at your career, if you look at your business on paper, Kevin, and I know your business very well because we operate similarly, if I was to take your business model and show it to any competent business person, 10 out of 10 of them would say it's a failure and you shouldn't be making the money that you're making.
Sure.
But as a byproduct of you caring about people, not yourself, and not having an agenda, and you shared this with me earlier, and you're like, I don't want to force people. I want it to be invitation. That is the definition of permission-based marketing, which is the best way to win the game. And because of that, Kevin, as a byproduct, when you have patience and you create an invitation, every single person you come into contact to eventually ends up in your bucket because you had the patience to get them there. You operate like this every day. It's beautiful to witness. It's the reason you're so successful.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because a lot of times we can't see things for ourselves that are right in front of us, and I appreciate you being a mirror and just kind of, shining that back this way, and
Yeah,
so.
man. And the reason I say that though is like, think about you, right? Like think about all the times where you were in a moment with somebody, right? And you're like, oh my God, I could totally close this person right now. But your gut was like, that's not what's best for them. And then in that moment, you chose to be a leader, right? But then if you reflect back, Kevin, 6 months in that period, something happened. They wrote you a check, they made an intro for you, they put you on stage, they gave you a podcast guest. You actually monetized 25 times more any dollar amount that you could, and potentially even got $1 in the process
Yeah,
because you were willing to play the right game.
yeah.
And what a lot of people don't recognize is that that is actually the path to success, right? Because money is a byproduct of an input with clarity, right? It's
Mhm.
it's it's an equation. It's the end of an equation. It's not something that you just go create. And when you understand that and you're willing to play that game, you win that game. And Kevin, you do this like, effortlessly. But I think what a lot of people have to understand is that just because we live on the internet doesn't mean it changes human capacity or human biology. We're still human beings that want to be in relationships, right?
Yeah.
And I think the gift is, and the gift of having a podcast is that we get to share these lessons and hope that somebody can pick them up and not learn from our mistakes, right? Like I'm 39 years old and I feel like a kindergartner because it took me this long to learn it. And now I get to start over, right? You've been in this game for a long time, 27 years, and you're like, oh yeah, this is it. And for the people listening, we're going to get into conversations about relationships, but there's one that I think that is the most important one for everybody that they sacrifice over everything else. And it's really where the secrets are. And so I just wanted to edify you for a minute, man, because at the end of the day, I think business gets really simple when you eliminate the business and you see it as people, right? You see it as your neighbors, you see it as your community. Like one of my favorite hacks for myself when I'm struggling in business, like if I'm like, oh, Kevin's on a call with me and he wants my help and I'm struggling to make an offer. The only thing I do, Kevin, is I envision that you're my wife and I'm about to sell my wife. And I have no problem selling my wife because I know there's an equal exchange of value. But when I put it in that bucket, it eliminates the business, the agenda. It becomes somebody that I care about. And I'm like, how would I help this person I care about? And in that moment, I know instantly if I should make the offer or not. And if I don't, I know exactly what I need to help them with in order for them to be ready. And because there's not that attachment, it wins because every time they go, they always come back, right? How can I lose that game? Right. I had this philosophy.
You can't.
Like, and I'll throw a little marketing tidbit out because this is something I teach people and I think it'll be relevant to people listening. But I hate losing, Kevin. Like I hate it. I hate it with a passion. And I was like, how can I design a business that I'm guaranteed to win? And I was like, great. What does everybody I do know? I'm like, as soon as they get a lead, the first thing they do is close them. And if they're not a good fit, they just tell them no. And I'm like, but on a good day, 5% convert, which means if 100 people come through, I'm fighting for 5 yeses out of 100, but I have 95 people who were interested. They just weren't ready yet. And I was like, they can't be that far off. And I was like, that just looks like such a bigger blue ocean. I was like, cool. If I get on a call and they're ready, I'll take their money. If they're not, I'm going to ask them what they need and I'm going to give it to them for free and see if they'll get ready and then their money will come in. And then I ended up building a model around this, but I realized that I really can't lose because I don't have no's anymore. Because if you get on a sales call with me and I'm like, hey, this isn't a good fit, you're like, wait, I wanted to pay you. You respect me. You trust me. And I'm like, no, I want you to do this instead. And I was going to help you with this anyways. But I want you to do this. And this might work to the point where you never need me again anyways. Go do this thing for 30 days. I can't lose that game because my worst case scenario, Kevin, is they leave and they don't implement it. But their last interaction was me giving more value than I asked for. So when they need help again, they'll reach back out. The second thing is they take it and they implement it and then it doesn't work. Who do you think they call for help?
That's me. That's right.
Third thing, they take it, they implement it and it works and they tell me it works and I tell them to keep going. I still win. They take it, they implement it, it works. They don't want to run it anymore. They call me and ask me to do it. Or they take it, it works, and they want the next level, and they call me and hire me to get them to the next level. I can't lose.
Yeah.
Ever. And so it's just a matter of being willing to really understand the game that we're playing. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I made as an entrepreneur, and I think most entrepreneurs make, is they measure their success in too small of a window. And it prevents them from making the moves that allow them to win the game in its entirety. Because this is a game of chess. This is not checkers, right? This is an ultra marathon where the distance increases without them telling you, right? And until you are truly retired or you are buried, cremated, or no longer on this earth, if you are any semblance of an entrepreneur, there's always going to be miles added.
That's right. It's interesting that you, because I can tell you that I've done business lately with, before we started recording, we were talking about Dan, and I've known Dan since 2007. Well, Jiminy Christmas, that's 16 years.
16 years.
But him and I did not start doing business together until 2020, 3 years ago. So we've known each other for 13 years before we ever did business together.
1000%. Dude, my whole life. my whole life. Like I have people this week. I walked into my office in Austin 3 weeks ago and I saw a ghost, and I bumped into one of my male friends, my buddy I haven't seen in 9 years. And he was standing in my office to meet one of my co-founders who didn't know we were co-founders together. We reconnected, and now we're doing Norway together, doing a business together, all in the last 2 weeks. And I just happened to walk in and he was there for a meeting and we reconnected. And I'm like, God, I've known you for this long. And it took this long and we haven't talked in 4 years, and now we're instantly working together.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. And some people might say, well, geez, you guys, all those years before I can make any money, are you kidding me? What would you say to
No,
that, George?
no, because the game is the same, just the levels change.
That's right.
That's
That's
all it is, right? Like what it took me so long to recognize, Kevin, and I made it so hard, is for years I was convinced there was a finish line. Oh, I got it. Oh, I know it. Oh, I learned it. Oh, it works. That offer works. That lead magnet works. That's my content strategy. That's how I should do my podcast. That's why I failed. I failed to recognize that once it works, it's only going to work for about 24 hours. And then you're going to do it again. But it's always going to be the same principle. It's just different levels of capacity, right? And so, yeah, like in the beginning, like I'm throwing around big numbers. Like I can make a phone call and get $30 million right now in an hour, right? 10 years ago, I could only get $30. The only thing that changed is the decimal points with experience and knowledge gained, but the lessons are the same. And so you have to look at the lessons in congruence to where you are in your business. And so, whether you're trying to make your first $5,000 or you're trying to make your next 50,000, the only difference is the decimal point, but the behaviors are the same. The
Yeah.
actions are the same. And
Yeah.
so it still requires focus. And in my opinion, Kevin, it's a lot easier to make money on the bottom end of the rung than it is on the top end, because the bottom end of the rung forces focus and the top end has so much distraction that focus is almost impossible to find the needle movers when you really need them.
Mhm.
Right? Like when you have a $2 million a year business that's struggling to make revenue and has been making it on 12 different channels, and you can't figure out which one's not working in the next 30 days, that's very different than a $5,000 a month business that has one offer that just stopped working for the last 3 weeks, because that tells me it's either the offer or the audience. Nothing else is broken. So it's actually a lot easier in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
what's required and the mindset required is that every single time that you try and it doesn't work, that was a path to getting it to work, not a reason that you fail and quit.
that's right. That's
Because
right.
for every like everyone looks at me now and they're like, dude, every time you write an email sequence, it converts. I'm like, I've written 74,000 of them that didn't work. Like literally billions and billions of emails have been sent by my fingers that didn't convert. So I can write the one now, 17 years later, that works every time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you have to understand is that the more willing you are when you lose to just pick up the bat and swing again, the faster you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Because you will get there. But no offer, no audience, no business is the same. What you learn is you learn the science. The art is your ability to apply it. And
Yeah.
you have to keep swinging. And like, even to this day, like I am known as one of like the best email marketers of our generation, like not given by me, given by many other marketers like Mike Dillard and people I respect. Right. And I love email. And it was my favorite thing to talk about, except the market dictated that nobody talked about email marketing anymore. And they started calling it customer journey, which I was calling it for years, but I had to change my business. I didn't try to change the market to me. So
Mm-hmm.
even though I loved talking about email and I had courses about email and lead magnets about email, the market wasn't responding to them anymore. And if I was romantic about it, I would have rode the Titanic to the bottom. Instead, I paid attention. I was like, oh, they're calling it customer journey. So we went, updated our courses. We called them customer journey courses and changed the language. And I'm still teaching email. I'm just calling it customer journey. And
Yeah.
then it added a couple $1 million to the bottom line. And so my advice is to recognize that if you take the time to analyze your situation, right? As an entrepreneur, for lack of better terms, your job is to be a triage nurse as much as possible. And the more awareness you have of your situation at any given time, the more informed and able you are to make a clear decision, right? And so if you're at a point in your business, no matter what scale of your business, and you're not making any money, and you need to stop and you need to analyze what's happening. And you need to look at, okay, in the last 60 days, what are the 3 things that I did that made me money every time I did them? And what are the 10 things I did that every time I did them, they didn't make me money? And you stop the behaviors that didn't, and then you make a plan to focus on the ones that did. And
Yeah.
I think people forget that there isn't I set my intention and it magically shows up. Like in March of 2020, was clearing $500,000 a month into my pocket. And by May of 2020, I was losing $40,000 a month because of COVID. I lost 2 companies and I lost an entire mastermind that was all Amazon businesses. And I had to start over 3 years ago.
Wow.
And then starting over, I launched a podcast. I now own 8 more companies and I'm back to multi-million-dollar plus years. But Kevin, I went from being the top of my game, charging $50,000 a day for consulting. And 3 months later, I started charging $1,000 a day again because the win and the rep was more important to me than the number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the behavior was the same. And I had to go all the way back to kindergarten. I lived and was running $1 million business with $1 million expenses, except I had to go back to being $1,000 a month entrepreneur to start over and rebuild the pieces. And it got close. It got close, but I made it by the skin of my teeth. And so, I think for people to recognize, like, if you want to lose weight, no matter which way you slice it, until you do something actively that will help you do it, the weight's not going to come off. And so if you want to succeed as an entrepreneur, until you actively do something with a behavior that's aligned to creating a new result, nothing will change. And so the more you understand that this is a game of consistency, and the consistency works if you're clear on what the behaviors are, the faster you'll win. But too many entrepreneurs, myself included for years, would get triggered, would lose money, and then immediately just start taking actions thinking it would fix it. But all I was doing was making it bleed worse because I didn't really know what was happening. I was running from the pain in the business. And I needed to learn how to sit and be like, holy shit. Okay, cool. Like, this is the situation in front of me. I have this, I have this, I have this. Doing nothing isn't going to work, and doing something without clarity isn't going to work. So irregardless, I'm going to end up here. So let me just choose to sit here now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not looking for what I'm going to serve for dinner, Kevin. All I'm looking for is the next bite. Sometimes that next bite is I need to go for a 10-minute walk. Sometimes the next bite is I need to write this one email. It just is, as soon as you find that next bite, you pick up the bat and you swing at it. And then when you're done with that bite, you find the next one. And it's going to apply no matter what level of business you're in. I mean, I coach billionaires. I coach them on the same exact thing.
Yeah.
That same concept comes all the way down. And so I think that's the most important mindset to have when it comes to understanding this, because there's not a lack of money, but underneath money is relationships. And if you think you're going to succeed as an entrepreneur alone, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And so if you get to that point, I'm telling you that the answers are in front of you, but it requires that you have the ability to ask for help and own it. And you have clarity, because your friends can't give you money if you're acting on tilt, they can't see it. But if you come to them, you're like, all right, cool. Here's where I am. Here's what I'm thinking. They're going to give you 100 ideas, and there's 10 grand sitting one phone call away from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your phone, on your Facebooks, anywhere. But Kevin, the thing that I preach more than anything is that, like, awareness is the finish line. Because the moment I have an integrous awareness of my situation, I just choose what my next step is. I only lose when I take actions while pretending to know what my situation was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the game. And so the more, and I tell people this, I'm like, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is that every day you make more choices based on behaviors for your future self rather than reactions to your past self. And if you make one more decision and the positive side than the negative side, you're still going to lose the weight. You're still going to grow because that momentum is going to carry over. And then you'll make more decisions from the positive side than the negative side. And eventually that muscle gets conditioned. Just like for you and I doing content now, we could walk into a room blindfolded. They could throw us on stage in front of 1,000 people and say, do a podcast, and we would start instantly.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But if we went back 22 years, Kevin, you and I would sit up there like, well, I mean, we might laugh a little bit, but I can't say there would be anything valuable for the audience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just because of the amount of reps that we've put in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it comes down to entrepreneurship, every single day as an entrepreneur is the ER room. That's how it's supposed to be. If your business is breaking, it's growing. If your muscles are breaking, they're getting stronger. That's how this game works. And so the moment you recognize that that is the game and you see the punches in the faces as check engine lights instead of personal attacks, you really start to win the game. Because yeah, it still hurts. Like it hurts when my client's like, oh, you offended me. Here's the thing. If I take offense, I'm going to lose the client. If I hear what offended them and I adjust my behavior, no matter how uncomfortable I am, not only will I keep the client, I'll keep more of my clients because I received the feedback.
Yeah.
So it comes down with my ability to sit in discomfort. And that is a muscle that we don't practice anymore, because when we don't feel good, we go to our phones, we go to Netflix, we go out, we run from our feelings because we are surrounded by distraction. But then we wonder why, when we're met with resistance in business, and it's one of the biggest decisions we've ever made, we can't get clarity. It's because we don't know how to sit with that. We don't know how to process that, and we never practice it.
That's huge. Wow. I'll tell you, I just want to honor you for just sharing all that you did, because there is so much packed in this shit. I want to go back and listen to this, okay. So one thing is certain. You, George, are just so passionate about the work that you do, and the clients you serve, and the relationships in your life. And so what I want to switch gears just a bit here, and I want to give you the opportunity to honor some of these people that have had such a profound impact on your life and on your business. So I'm gonna just reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And George, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic and around these relationships.
Yeah. Jesus, this is such a good question. And you asked me before the show if it was going to be one or multiple.
Yep.
I said multiple, but at truth be told, at the core of all of them, there's two.
Okay.
And the first one is my wife, Lindsay Jean. To set some context, I met my wife in 2012. My wife is 2 years older than me. Prior to my wife, in the 30 years leading up to that, I grew up in a drug abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse home, and was homeless most of my life. Was raped and molested by women when I was 9, 13, and 16, and so didn't really have a healthy childhood, and so I ran away to the Marine Corps. And then I spent 13 years of my life on active duty, no relationships, just war, trauma, fighting. And I met my wife 1 month before I got out of the Marine Corps. And my wife had been doing personal development work, consciousness work, hypnosis, and NLP for about 15 years when she met me. And so you could not meet somebody on more opposite ends of the spectrum. And my wife left me 5 or 6 times before we got married and should have never taken me back. Changed her phone number, no contact orders. But for some reason, my wife was a big enough catalyst that every time I broke something or hurt something, she was the only person that ever made me want to fix it from my heart and not from my head. And so my wife, for 10 years, a decade, probably sacrificed the most beautiful parts of her from being a mirror and a punching bag for me on the other side, as I healed trauma that was never intended for her.
Wow.
And she is the woman, she is the reason I'm alive. I've attempted my life and she stopped me. She's the reason I have a son, the reason I have purpose. She has stood by my side and for me when no one else should have, through the thickest of everything, and stood until I truly believed that I was worth loving. And she sacrificed everything. And so I share this because a lot of the things that I say so easily. But I'm so passionate because I only know them because I caused so much pain by not living them. And every day I'm faced with either be the man that caused all the pain or be the man that does something with the pain you caused. And so since I don't want to die, and I really believe I want to live, but I struggle with purpose every day, the easiest purpose is about making amends and giving away what I wanted my whole life. And that is the happiest I've ever been. And it gives me something to do every day. And it feels so easy to me, but I wouldn't have any of it if it wasn't for Lindsay.
Yeah.
But if I was to ask Lindsay that question, she'd give you a second answer, and I'm going to give you the second answer. Because what Lindsay really did is Lindsay stood solid for 10 years to force me to fall in love with myself. And she didn't let me hide from me. And she stood there for as long as it took to get me to realize that the only way I was going to win is if I chose to love myself first. And I can say that that has been achieved, and we are in the best place, and I am, and our family as ever. And that's within the last year. And it's a muscle that I work on every single day. I invest every ounce of my existence into understanding me. And it's not light, it's dark, it's shadows. It's understanding the parts of me and those stories and the wounds and the stories that I made up, and really exploring them. So I know how to have a passion, and I know how to drive my car that I was issued. And it's a really exciting place, man. Like I'm 39 on paper. I'm 150 in my soul based on the lives I've lived, but my heart feels like it's 6. And yeah, I cry 3 times a day. I laugh. I have anger. Like that's what being a human is. That's range. I love every ounce of it. And, man, for me, with the lessons I've learned, I took all those things that I learned, and the reason my business is named what it is, and the reason I use a lighthouse, is I created an entire business to hold me accountable to the man I want to be instead of the man that I was. I trademarked the phrase relationships beat algorithms because I didn't believe in them. I used a lighthouse because a lighthouse is truly about giving, and I always gave an agenda. I made a brand called Unapologetically Authentic because I lived my life most of the time as a lie. I teach people to love human beings with no agenda, so that's how I treat the people in my life. It's a choice, but it was because of her and her willingness to stand in that fire over and over and over again. And she would say the same about me because we both grew and healed each other and helped so much.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be on this planet. I wouldn't be alive. And not one person would know me if it wasn't for Lindsay. I can honestly say that, yes, I showed up and executed on the field, right? Like I put my pads on, but she was responsible for every single other piece of that, including getting me on the field.
Wow. I mean, what an amazing testament to Lindsay. And
Mm-hmm.
what an amazing testament to you too, George, because I'm sure that there is so many entrepreneurs that would listen to this and be like, man, I can totally relate to the way George feels. I can totally relate to that. I don't love myself. Man, there was a time when I sure as hell didn't love myself,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and I mean, and like you said, that you work at it every day. You work
Because
at
it's a moment to moment to choice like that. And that's the most beautiful part. Like, here's the thing. When I retire, Kevin, I'm launching a fucking fortune cookie business. That's it. I'm taking all your quotes, my quotes, Brad's quotes, like all of our tweetables, and I'm launching like a conscious entrepreneur mindset woo-woo fortune cookie thing, right? That's it. That's my retirement goal. But like, it's so funny how for years we relegate life to these quotes, right? These fortune cookies, these meanings. But then the more we live, Kevin, we remember these phrases and we're like, oh my God, if we just listened to them 20 years ago
yeah.
and did what it said, it was so, so simple, right? And, I've heard for years, like, you remember, like, the best moment is the presence, the gift of the presence, the book, The Present Moment, right? It's like, if you're having anxiety, it's thinking about the future. If you're having depression, it's thinking about the past, right? You're not in the moment. And here's the craziest part. I struggled for years because I thought there was a plan to love myself. Like, what's the playbook, right? What's the workout program? How do I do it every day? And I ran entrepreneurship like that as well. And then I realized that the plan has to be moment to moment. Like, that's it. Like it's like there's a quote from one of my favorite teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed away. But in one of his Buddhist teachings, he says, the moment you recognize you are, you no longer are. And this is such a powerful concept because the moment I recognize like I'm being loving, I'm not actually being loving anymore because I'm in my head and not in my heart. I'm not in the moment anymore. And so what I started to recognize is that the moments that I was realizing I was being mean to myself was actually me not being mean to myself, because I was reflecting on it instead of doing it. But instead of seeing it, I would continue to be mean to myself. And I realized it was a moment to moment choice, because if I can recognize that I'm having bad thoughts about myself, I'm actually not having the bad thoughts anymore. And so in that moment, I can say, okay, I can choose a new thought, or I can work through that thought. I only lose when I pretend that I didn't see it and I push it back down. And so that self-love for me, when I recognize it wasn't this thing that I learned, it wasn't this thing that I did, it wasn't this new breakthrough, is that in those moments, just finding one way to choose the other side, right? Which wolf do I want to feed, right? The situation's the same. And I was like, hey, is there a way to feed the other wolf? And in the beginning, I would only feed the positive wolf like 3 or 4 times a day. Now I probably feed that bitch like 6,000 times a day, right? Because I'm like, every moment I can, I'm like, what's the other side? What's the empowering thought? And now it's like a game to me, but I recognize that the more that I flex that muscle, the easier everything in my life gets, because it becomes my default operating mode rather than my forced operating mode.
That's interesting, because I used to, there was a good 3-4 year stretch where I for that whole damn 3 or 4 years, I didn't say hardly any good things to myself about myself, and and I remember somebody close to me, a gal that I knew really well and respected, and her comment was like, Kevin, just stop saying that to yourself. When you're thinking something like that, just say, no, I'm not going to think about that thing, and I'm going to think about something else. I'm going to think about something I want to think about that's more enjoyable. And in the moment when we had that conversation, I don't know why it didn't register with me, but now I find myself doing that
Yep.
regularly.
Yep.
If
In
I
the beginning, Kevin, in the beginning, when I was working through this, I used cognitive behavioral therapy, because I think the other thing, and this is an important caveat, and I want everybody to hear this. If you are dancing in your head, you're guaranteed to lose. If you are dancing in your head, you're guaranteed to lose. And all I simply mean by that is, if you are ruminating, if you put it on paper in front of you, you won't ruminate anymore. Your brain will always create an exclusion. And so get it out of your head. Audio, writing, voice, speaking. Just don't ever try to make decisions from your head. It's the worst place, because there's no escape, right? Absolutely none. But with that, Kevin, I was kind of in the same bucket, because I was like, I don't know what to do, right? I was like, oh, I get that, like, oh, you say cancel and you're changing your thought, right? Or, oh, I want to think a new thought, but I couldn't do it. But I would catch the thoughts. And one of my friends was like, just say cancel out loud when you catch the thought. And I was like, that's it? And they're like, yeah, that's it. So I'd be in the middle of a conversation, or like sitting down, I'd be like, cancel. My wife's like, what? I'm like, oh, I just had a negative thought. She's like, well, what's your new positive one? I'm like, I'm a loving husband. She's like, great, move on. And I started saying it out loud, and it was so crazy, because it was so quick, like Pavlov's dog's response. Like, within a matter of days, I wasn't even having the thoughts anymore, because I was saying cancel before I had the thought. And so, a couple of my clients, one of them doesn't like to speak out loud, but what they do, and this works for them, is whenever they have a negative thought, they keep a pad of sticky notes on their desk that's their least favorite color. They hate this color. And so whenever they have a negative thought, they write the sticky note on the sticky note, and then they stack them on their desk. And at the end of the day, they burn them every day. And in the beginning with her, what I would have her do, Kevin, is she'd have one, and I would have her write it down. And then I'd say she could go back to work when she wrote the opposite statement.
Okay.
Right. And so it's like, oh, I'm such a loser. I'm like, oh, yeah, because I know so many losers that run $4 million a year companies as a hobby.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, note taken. Right. And so one of the things that I say to entrepreneurs is, when you get it out of your head, you also give yourself the space to ask yourself, would I be willing to bet my life on this evidence in a court of law? Right. I ask myself this all the time. Like, would I be willing to die for this evidence? Like, if I was in a court of law, would I give my life or risk my life on this evidence? And I'd say 9 out of 10 times, Kevin, the answer is no. And typically it solves most of my problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I get it out of my head, what it allows me to do is to see it for what it is. And then when I can put some realness to it and some perspective to it, typically it shrinks down to the size that it is, not how big it is, right? So for people here, they're like, I know everybody's gotten this, right? You get that text from your one that you love, like, hey, we need to talk. And you're like, oh, fuck, right? And every worst case scenario runs through your fucking head, right? Like
Sure. Yeah.
everything, right? And then, of course, they like go into a dead zone or they're on an airplane, their phone stops working, right? And then you're like, boom, my life is over. Boom, 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 boom. And then she calls you and she's like, honey, you bought the wrong fucking color. And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All that stuff was completely made up.
That's right. That's
That
right.
is your reptilian limbic brain trying to keep you in survival. But here's the funny part. If you had just stopped some of that and wrote down, oh my God, my wife's leaving me, and you read it, you would laugh at yourself. But because we keep it in our brain, we believe that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to find a way to get it out, because that's what allows you to see it rather than being inside the pill bottle that's experiencing it.
Yeah. 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 That's huge. That's huge. So I want to ask a question, because one thing I've learned in doing over 150 interviews on this podcast now, it's not like I didn't know it before, but now I'm like 1000% convinced of it, that as entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset we possess. Everything else stems from that. And not only that, the relationships that we have allow us to provide exponential value from our own gifts, our own unique abilities, as Dan Sullivan would call them, and that we could never do on our own if not for the relationships. We can make such a bigger impact because of the relationships, you know. And so if you look specifically at the relationship with you and Lindsay, I'm sure you could probably tell me countless stories, but what is an example of something that's just really stands out to you right here in this moment, that where an impact was made that was huge, that hands down would have never happened if
Yep.
not for the relationship with you and Lindsay?
Easy. I'll tell you right now. It's the one that changed my entire career in life. I was in Austin, Texas, about to give a keynote to 1,000 people on the three ways to use food to create breakthrough habits in your life. And I was a touring New York Times bestseller, and I was still actively bulimic while I was teaching paleo and loving your body. And I was about to give that keynote, and Lindsay was with me in the green room. And I was about to go up, and she said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Are you really going to go up there and lie again?"
Ouch. Oh, man.
And she didn't have to say another word. And I knew exactly what she meant. And I couldn't give that keynote. And I walked up on stage, and I knew I either had to tell them the truth or I had to retire. And so I told them I was scared. I was petrified. I was dry heaving. I was drenched in sweat. I have the video. It's nauseating to watch. And what I hadn't told them is that the whole time that I was teaching them paleo and winning and making money, I was actively bulimic and an addict, and nobody knew. And so I went up on that stage, and instead of giving my keynote, I did a confessional, and I told everybody, and I thought my whole career was over. And everybody that was standing up sat down. Everybody that was on their phones put them away. And then I gave my talk, and that talk is the only reason I have a career. And the only reason is because she challenged me to be honest and integrous. And that was what taught me what was really going to get me to win the game. That moment changed everything for me.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
You know, my friend Jesse Elder has this say. I've heard him say.
I love Jesse. I just saw him like 2 weeks ago.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am. You and I are both so blessed to have that guy that we count as a friend and a mentor, and you know
It's Morpheus.
yes, one of the things I hear him say a lot is, nothing to hide and nothing to prove.
Nope.
And, when we can show up that way, it is such a freeing experience. It's like, man, we can it takes so much weight off of us.
Yep. Yep.
And because we're always worried about what would people think if they knew whatever that about me.
Yep.
And what you
it's what true freedom is. Listen, it's what true freedom is. And here's the best part about it. The most empowering part is recognizing that when you catch yourself not in it, in 1 second, you can choose to be back in it.
Yeah.
Like you are always one choice away from true freedom.
Yeah.
And there's a really good book, Kevin, and I think every entrepreneur should read it. It's called Radical Honesty. It's an incredible book. Don't go to the conference, but read the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you go to the conference, you're going to end up on stage naked and having people pinpoint your inaccuracies and what they don't like so you can learn how to take it. Because I didn't go to the conference, but the book's incredible.
Well, George, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got to run in just a minute, but
I do.
Anybody listening to this that is like, damn, Kev, I really like George, man. How can they find out more about what you guys are doing and stuff?
Well, if that is you, thank you, because I really do believe I feel like I belong in a padded room, and I'm just glad you guys let me out into the universe and give me a platform. So listen, I'll tell you, the best place is my podcast, The Mind of George Show. We have 400 episodes. I'll tell you this up front. I get paid copious amounts of money to do what I do, and I give every single bit of it away for free on the podcast. I don't hold anything back. Mindset, marketing, customer journey, business practices, you name it, we cover it. So it's called The Mind of George Show. Everywhere you can find a podcast, and to make it really easy, you can just go to mindofgeorge.com. It's the pinkest website you'll see. You'll quickly learn it's my favorite color. But if I can help you, if you have any questions, any way you get a hold of us, whether you DM us on Instagram or email us, it will come directly to me, and my team and I are here to support you. And so however we can help, if you resonated with anything we said, we are here to support. So know that you have a family in us if you feel like reaching out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, George, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, man. Just love and appreciate you. And
oh, dude, it was a gift. Thank you.
Awesome.